to a Hope 1032 podcast.
Hello everyone, it's so good to be back with you. Welcome to Season 6 of Raising Teens. I'm your host, Collett Smart. I'm a psychologist, a teacher, and also a parent in the middle of raising my own teen and young adult children. I started this podcast because I know that many teens are struggling, and I wanted to create an online village of support for parents. I'm joined again this season by well-known experts on teen mental health and well-being. I have such hope for this generation of young people, so each episode is jam-packed with support so that you can get on with the job that you do best. That is, connecting with and loving your teen. Dr. Veya Sekas is a lecturer within the School of Applied Psychology at Griffith University and lectures in first-year introductory psychology. Veya also conducts research in the areas of social, developmental, and health psychology. She has conducted research in schools with teens from 12 to 18 and with young adults aged 17 to 25. Her research has been published in peer-reviewed academic journals, and she's been interviewed by the New York Times and the ABC on the impacts of social media on young people's body image, but also about how self-compassion may be one way to negate some of these negative impacts. You might use TikTok yourself, or you may have absolutely no idea what this app is that your children are using. Essentially, TikTok is a mobile app and it hosts short-form videos from 15 seconds to around 10 minutes long, with the average video being around 27 seconds. TikTok has taken over Instagram as the most downloaded app in recent years. The difference is that on Instagram, teens see posts from people that they choose to follow, but TikTok will send them videos based on what they have watched or liked before. So this means that the things your teen is watching can quickly narrow in focus, showing them videos on a particular theme, even if these are videos they have not searched for themselves or didn't intentionally mean to watch. We've seen quite a lot about TikTok in the media in the last month or so. Why is that? Well, countries are trying to ban or restrict access to the app because it is owned by the Chinese company ByteDance. And this is due to concerns it may endanger sensitive user data or pose security threats. In this episode, we're not getting into the technical side of the app. We're focusing on the effects that the video content itself has on our teens. I should just also say quickly that TikTok is an age-restricted app and is not suitable for children or even younger teens. There is a link in the show notes on this. Hello, Veya. Welcome to Raising Teens.
Hi, Collett. Thank you so much for having me.
I have been fascinated by some of your research that I've seen online and all over the media. I know, Veya, parents are often concerned about social media, and we certainly know that there are positives in terms of connections and our young people chatting and it being part of their world. But then, of course, there are other areas in our children's social media world where I think Associate Professor Wayne Warburton would talk about the fats and oils or the poisons of technology. And so some of your research looks at findings with regards to social media use, particularly some of the negative impacts on young people. So could you talk to us a little bit about some of your main findings with regards to social media and young people's body image?
Yeah, of course. Over the last sort of 6 years or so, social media research has really kind of come into its own. And we now have a large body of evidence to show this. So it isn't just my research, it's certainly my research contributes to it. And this is pretty much in all Western countries. So we're talking about Australia, the UK, the United States. What we have found is that there are links between viewing certain types of content on social media and body dissatisfaction, drive for thinness in young girls, and drive for muscularity in young boys. We found that these particular outcomes are symptoms of psychopathologies, such as eating disorders, So they can lead to those kinds of things, and they can lead to anxiety and depression. What we have also found is that not only do we have links between them, but there's a lot of experimental research now, which is actually testing these. And so we can actually start to see that there are now causal effects. For example, I'll just bring mine in. So I had a compilation of TikTok videos, and they came to 7 minutes. So I had beauty videos, and these are videos, beauty tutorials. So they talk to their viewers about how they can enhance their features, how to basically look better. But we also had some content in there that was before and afters. So what someone might look before, what someone might look after. And some of these involved things such as baby Botox, so-called preventative, minimally invasive procedures, which I think is really quite disturbing for young people. They really don't need that kind of thing, do they? So we compiled these together, and then we compared them with some other videos. So we had self-compassion videos and we had travel videos. And travel is obviously the neutral one. And what we found when we had an even number of girls looking at these videos, that it was the beauty videos that led to appearance concerns. So we found that after 7 minutes of viewing, their appearance anxiety increased, their appearance shame increased, their self-compassion decreased, and they were more likely to compare themselves with the girls that they were viewing in those videos. And we know that comparison
After 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's incredible considering the amount of videos and influencers that our young people follow online on TikTok and Instagram and so on. So what are some of the main findings from your research regarding social media and young people's body image? You mentioned there the difference between boys and girls, and we've seen that for quite some time. Can you unpack that? It sounds like it's still what we kind of knew before, that girls are really concerned about thinness and boys are worried about six-packs and biceps and muscles.
That is certainly true. Some of the things have evolved in terms, probably more so in terms of girls' body image. And whilst, let's say, a decade ago, thinness was definitely the thing that girls were drawn to, there's now another element that girls need to fit into their prescription of the appearance ideal, and that is being fit and toned. So we have appearance-related content on social media. One trend that comes to mind is Fitspiration, where they have these really unrelenting standards about how one's body should look and what one needs to do to actually attain that body.
Instagram and TikTok have become a huge influence on our young people's fashion, fitness, beauty trends, and entertainment, just like the magazines many of us grew up with. The difference is that the apps are available 24 hours a day with thousands of hours of content. As of November 2022, the beauty hashtag on TikTok exceeded 100 billion views, and beauty is the highest appearance focus category. This doesn't mean that your teen went on TikTok looking for ways to become more beautiful. They may have simply watched or liked one or two videos, and then the app decided that this is what they wanted to see, and their feed was flooded. You may feel worried about your teen who is struggling with their body image, body dysmorphia, or eating disorders. You may also wonder, how can I talk about food and exercise without making it an unhealthy issue? If you notice some of the changes in the way your teen talks about their food, their body shape, exercise, or even other people's appearances, I want to recommend that you go back and have a listen to our episodes on body image and eating disorders with Sarah McMahon in Season 4, Episode 8, and Nutrition with Meg McClintock in Season 5, Episode 10.
So Fitspiration is where a creator will do some exercise routines. They go through their daily eating habits. So they really try and instill a so-called healthy lifestyle. But unfortunately, what comes with that is, again, an unrelenting standard about how one's body should be. I think one of the main things, and this is what the research has shown in Fitspiration, I've done a little bit on it myself, But what the research has shown is that people who create these trends and contribute to these trends are also the type of people who have a lot of time on their hands. They can afford trainers. They can afford very expensive so-called healthy food. And so it seems as though what they're doing is the norm. It seems as though what they're doing is achievable and anybody can do this. But that isn't the case. And so what happens when people view this is they tend to criticize themselves. So for some reason, they're not good enough. It's not the fact that the content they're viewing is actually unrealistic in most situations. They turn it back on themselves. And this is where the danger starts to come in.
And so what is the line then, the fine line between having decent content online that does educate our young people around healthy eating and healthy exercise and staying mentally well compared to this fitspiration? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, I wish I did. But unfortunately, social media is driven so much by, it's a monetary thing. And that's why people create content on it. So the kind of content you might see on social media is probably not the kind of content that probably would receive your best information from. If you really want to learn more about diet, go and see somebody who really specializes in that area. I also think that much of this starts at home. If we can have a good, healthy environment in the household, rather than them going online and trying to find different things, because most of the time they're just fads.
So, Vaya, you were talking about how girls now have even more of a standard, it seems, to measure up to. It's not just thinness, it's this needing to have this toned body. I know I've said to students and I've said to my own daughter, it depends also at what point in history you are. I know the big thing now is to have the big butt. When I was young, you daren't ask someone, does my bum look big in these jeans? Because if they said yes, you would have collapsed in a heap, because at that point you needed to have an ironing board type bum, really. And now the girls have to have a Kim Kardashian bum. It seems like the goalposts just keep getting shifted with our young people. What are some of the mental health challenges that you've seen in your research coming out of this?
Yeah, it is very interesting what you've just mentioned there, because one of the shifts as well, when you bring in a bigger body or a curvier body, in most instances, Kim Kardashian included, often use injectables to create certain curves. So not only do we have the mental health issue of diet restriction, which is something that, most young people have had to deal with at some point, or building that muscle, which is what the boys tend to want to do more. But now there's this added issue of having fillers or having something that actually comes into our body to make it conform to what the appearance standards are online. It is interesting that you mentioned Kim Kardashian, because she's now, after having done the whole Marilyn Monroe dress at the Met Gala not long ago, she actually lost a lot of weight in a short amount of time to fit into that dress. So she's now slimmed down. And there's a lot of backlash on social media. And this is how quickly social media changes and evolves. But there is now this understanding that we are perhaps moving back to the thinness. We're moving back to losing the weight. So as you mentioned before, the cycles are so important, particularly to young people who are trying to find their identity. With young people, they're wanting to establish their autonomy from their parents. So we're talking about teenagers. But at the same time, they're also wanting to please their peers. They're wanting to conform to their peers. They're also trying to find their own identity. So it is a really, really challenging time. And if they're feeling at all vulnerable about anything, then they're going to be more likely to take on information that isn't necessarily healthy for them. And in terms of the mental health outcomes, this is where they might isolate themselves. So if they feel they're not fitting in for whatever reason, if they're receiving negative comments online, if they're not getting enough likes for their pictures, these things can lead to social appearance anxiety. And social anxiety itself is all about that isolation, not wanting to interact. So these are key things that parents can certainly look out for in their children. And one thing that we don't talk about a lot is body dysmorphic disorder, which is it's a constant worry about something that we perceive is flawed in our appearance. So it is separate to the eating disorders. It is more an obsessive compulsive disorder, but it is certainly something that is coming to the fore a lot more now, particularly with social media.
And so you're saying when a young person has a focus on a particular area of their body, perhaps, their nose or their neck or their arms, when they're watching some of these so-called fitspiration videos, it's actually exacerbating some of their insecurities rather than helping. And so what are some of the risk factors then that could lead to mental health issues like eating disorders, anxiety and depression for our young people who are bombarded by these messages?
That's a really good question, because this is where intervention can actually come in. Some of the risk factors that we've looked at in modeling is comparison processes. If you find that your child is comparing themselves constantly to celebrities or other peers, that is a risk factor, particularly when it's constant, because that comparison process can actually lead to the anxiety. It can lead to all of those other outcomes. One of the other things is this internalization, we say, of appearance ideals, but it happens from when they're so young. So unfortunately, by the time they're teenagers, they've already internalized what it means to be attractive and what the ideal is in appearance. And that goes for both boys and girls. A couple of the other risk factors are body surveillance. So this is when they're constantly checking their body, whether it's in their reflection all the time, or they constantly need to check in the mirror. So those things are risk factors. And body shame. Body shame is another huge one. And that is just the feeling that they're just not good enough.
Yeah, we're often kinder to others than we are to ourselves. And so that's something that we, I think as adults, haven't learned early and we haven't done really well. And we're kind of learning now and could be something that we model to our teenagers. How do you see this then linking in with some of these concerns around body image and social media, the anxiety or body image issues that come up when they seeing something on TikTok or Instagram, for example?
This is what we did in my very recent experiment, where we had a group of girls watch self-compassion videos. And they're just very, 1 minute, quick videos. Some of them are funny, some of them are just lovely to listen to. And what we found was appearance anxiety, appearance shame, all reduced after 7 minutes of watching these videos. Self-compassion increased. So we know that mixing up our feed a little bit is good for us. I don't think it's realistic to ask young people not to watch this content. Their peers are doing it. Everyone's doing it. Asking them not to do it, I don't think is realistic. So I think as parents, as educators, and as people who influence young people, we need to just show them that there is different content that you can add to your feed that will actually help them not become so engrossed with it. So to the point where it becomes an obsession, because watching something like that can actually then translate into their own lives. And so every morning when they see themselves in the mirror, they start to see something that they didn't see before. And that's because they've been watching content that focuses so much on that.
I know that this is something that I've said in previous episodes, but it is so important for us as adults to teach new messages about health to our children. We kind of have to unlearn what we thought about someone's worth based on their body size or shape. Part of modeling self-compassion is recognizing self-worth. It's about teaching your teens that whether they have the butt, the nose, or the hair of some current influencer, that's not where their worth lies. That message on self-worth needs to come from you. It comes from how you view yourself and others. If you're comparing yourself or your child to others, then they will too. A parent's words often become their child's inner voice.
The beautiful thing about watching a self-compassion video is that, there might just be someone on there who tells you about their day and then says, but you know what? I practiced some self-compassion today and this is what I did. So it spins things around and it can help young people, but parents as well, help us understand that if we're watching unrealistic, very sort of highlighted content on social media, we start to believe that it's true. We start to find it difficult to differentiate between what's realistic and what's been edited, because it all seems to merge into one thing. But actually watching real people, just watching people every day do different things and talk about self-compassion kind of puts you in a different place, in a different environment. And it tends to cut through some of that more, let's call it toxic content, which is very highly idealized content.
Yeah. And so it's really about balancing your feed. I know I've spoken to young people about this a lot and challenging them to really balance their feed. And I suppose then, not saying all influencers are terrible, because there would be some who would still be regarded as an influencer who is giving that balance and expressing self-compassion. So we've spoken about contagion effect quite a bit on the podcast before. It can be positive. There's such beautiful things online that young people can see and emulate. And there are, for many young people in rural areas or places around the world where they can't access a mental health expert or somebody to help them with their mental health, social media can be very powerful in a positive way there. Because one of the people that I love to follow is Celeste Barber online. I don't know, Vaya, if you know Celeste Barber, you're going to have to go find it. Do you know her? I can see you nodding away.
I do.
I mean, who doesn't know Celeste Barber? She's hilarious. And when I've actually done work with teenagers at schools, I've shown them some of her Instagram images and her videos, and she really, for me, helps me in my feed go, oh yes, when we, seeing other things pop up online with celebrities, whether you ask for them or not, they pop up on your feed. And then there's Celeste Barber emulating something that Kim Kardashian did. And it's hilarious. And it normalizes the rest of us going, oh, whoa, okay, yeah, that's what it looks like to really lie in the bath compared to, how somebody else lay in the bath.
Celeste is amazing. And I'm glad you brought this up, because my colleague, Dr. Zali Yeager, has been working with Taryn Bromford, who is a body positive activist. And they have just released a film called Embrace Kids. I would highly recommend that parents try to watch this film, even with their children together. It is fantastic. It talks about body image, but it talks about inclusivity, all kinds of things that particularly that teenagers are likely to encounter whilst they're online. So it is a fantastic film. They have actually written a book as well called Embrace Kids. And there are some resources on the Embrace Hub that your viewers are more than welcome to go and read, because they've got quite a bit on self-compassion, and that's where I contributed to Embrace Kids. So, absolutely feel free to go and have a look at those resources. I think they'll be really, really pleased with the kind of things. And Celeste was a producer of Embrace Kids, and she also does a little bit of commentary throughout the film. So it's worthwhile seeing.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so coming back to earlier, you were talking about ways we could help parents. So we've spoken about the modeling and self-compassion. Are there any other tips you've got for parents when we talk to our young people about social media?
I think probably the best thing that parents can do is keep an open dialogue. So that just means having conversations, but having them regularly, not because something's come up. Because the more that we have those conversations with the children, the more likely we are to see if there are any issues going on. But also, the more that we have the conversations, the more likely the child will open up. If it is just sporadic here and there, they might keep things to themselves, thinking, I don't want to burden mum or dad or someone else. So there are many factors involved. And I understand that time is such a huge issue with most households. It's really hard finding the time. But I think this is such an important issue. And people have often asked me, should parents follow their kids online and all this kind of thing? I think most researchers would say it's probably a good idea. The thing that I would not recommend, though, is posting anything on their social media or commenting or being really active on their social media account. I think, as we spoke about before, they're still trying to establish their autonomy from parents. So they really need a little bit of space. But I think it's important as parents that boundaries are still in place. So just by following them, even if you just check on it, you can see the kind of content they're viewing. You can see the sort of interactions they're having. If there are some negative comments, maybe things that might be affecting them that they might not talk about. So I think a really good idea would be to just sit with them once a fortnight for 20 minutes and go, right, this is just our social media chat. Let's have a chat about the kind of things you guys have been talking about, what's been interesting for you. Never, ever kind of be judgmental, because that's probably the best way to shut the child down. They're not going to open up when someone's being judgmental or critical. Be curious and remember what it's like to be their age. And that is sometimes, I often forget that myself, what it's like to be their age. But they also have so much more to deal with than perhaps we did.
That word curious, I'm so glad you brought it up, because it's come up with so many experts on this podcast. And it's a challenge for us as parents to remain curious, ask questions about what's going on, rather than always feeling like we need to give advice. And, I'm talking to myself as a parent. It's reminding myself I don't always have to be giving my children advice. Sometimes they just need to be heard. And, some of those conversations also happen beautifully in the car on the way to somewhere. When you've noticed something on social media, you can just have a chat about what you've noticed.
Honestly, the car chats are fantastic. This is another area where we can bring self-compassion in. I use a traffic light symbol to remind us all. So red, stop and acknowledge your feelings. Orange, understand that these feelings are not unique to you. A lot of us experience them. And green, go ahead and be kind to yourself. So it's really easy when you're in the car and having the chat, the traffic light is right there in front of you. So if stress does come up, it's a really good reminder about, whoa, okay, how might we deal with this together? And having someone else be in it with you, I think is just such a strong point in terms of dealing with the kinds of things that young people have to deal with, but also how parents are going to try and deal with their children's anxieties and concerns. Because as parents, you just want to jump in and try and save them from everything. But sometimes you can't be the fix-it person all the time. They have to learn things on their own. And all you can do is guide them in the best way that you can. But having those open conversations means that if they are struggling, they are more likely to come to you with those struggles and concerns. And if you can't deal with them by yourself, there are psychologists, there are wonderful professionals who would be more than willing to help. And don't forget how self-conscious kids are at that age. This is where self-consciousness really starts to, become very visible. So yeah, we just need to keep in mind all of those things. When they're teenagers, they still need the boundaries. There's plenty of time to be friends with our kids, plenty of time. As they become adults, my goodness, they're going to be fantastic friends. But there's a time, and adolescence is one of those times where they still need a parent. But, the parenting role changes. It shifts from what it was when they were children.
Yeah. And so, Vaya, what is your hope for teens and families in your work and your research?
It's an interesting question, because we are at a time now where one whole generation have lived with social media. So we're still really finding out so many different things about the effects of simply only knowing social media in your life compared to the generations before who had a mixture or who had nothing as young people. So I think we're still trying to understand the effects of all of this. But I think we're becoming more and more aware of not just the traps, but also the goods and the positives of social media. And we know that there's good out there. And one of the things that we do, or I've been doing with schools as well, is getting the schools on board and saying, right, let's have, a metric-free Monday. That means no comments, no likes, no nothing. You post your pictures up there and everyone feels relaxed for a day, because it's not going to garner any likes. It's not going to get any comments. So these are just really good positive ways that you can share everything that you normally like to share without the worry and concern that someone's going to evaluate it. And I think there are some important things that we could do to help kids, particularly young teenagers, learn how to do things in a positive way. Having content like self-compassion online is wonderful. And I'm sure that there's plenty of other good positive things out there. pro-social behavior. We talked about the contagion effect before. It isn't difficult. You can use the contagion effect for positive things as much as you can for negative things. So let's start using it for some of those positives. And the more people we can get on board, the better. So it is a really good time to implement some positive strategies when using social media.
I love Vaya's reminder about the impact of what we see, hear, and interact with, and how these shape how we see ourselves and the world. If you would like to read more of Vaya's work, you can find her studies in the show notes. You can also find me or leave a question for a future episode via email or my Facebook page or via raisingteens.au. Or you can go to the Hope 1032 podcast page. Please subscribe and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'd love to see you next episode, and in the meantime, keep parenting with your teen's future adult in mind.
This episode was hosted by Collett Smart, edited and produced by Alec Green, imaging by Lucy Weil, and social media by Beth Rivers.
Hope 1032. Thanks for listening.